In the heart of the night, this world were bright, we will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright, we will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Today, I am going to be reviewing Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College. This installment in the franchise came out in 1991. It was directed by John-Carl Buechler, who also directed Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, Troll, and Cellar Dweller, and he did effects on a ton of movies, particularly in the horror genre. This movie stars Kevin McCarthy, who is the protagonist in the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 version of Piranha and Howling, Eva LaRue, who is in The Barbarians, RoboCop 3, and Crash and Burn, just to name some of her more genre-oriented work, but was also in a bunch of other movies and TV, including CSI Miami. The amazing Matthew Lillard makes an appearance in the film. It's tiny, but he's there. And he, of course, went on to do such amazing things as Scream, 13 Ghosts, and Scooby-Doo. And this movie stars Hope Marie Carlton, who is in Slumber Party Massacre 3, Slaughterhouse Rock, and the 1994 version of Stephen King's The Stand. She was also known for modeling and being Playboy Playmate of the Month in July of 1985. This film was a straight-to-video release by, of course, Vestron. And this installment follows a group of warring fraternities on a college campus during Prank Week. The two different warring fraternities are trying to one-up each other to win the Prank Crown, which is this admittedly kind of cool-looking jestery crown made out of tinfoil. Their humanities teacher and I think dean of students is kind of done with all of this, and at one point he confiscates a comic book from one of the students, which includes a poem for summoning the Ghoulies in it, which he reads out loud and ends up taking an interest in his own spare time. He ends up calling forth the Ghoulies and using them to continue the war between the two fraternities and escalate it to heights that will justify his image of them as just worthless, debauched teens. So the score for this film was done by two people. Michael Lloyd, who did a lot of music work on a lot of different films, but he himself composed the music for the 1998 version of Godzilla, the Garbage Pail Kids movie, and Savage Streets, as well as Reg Powell, who composed the music for Shadow Zone, The Undead Express, The Banker, and Ghost Rider. And their score for this movie gets back to the bouncy kind of Danny Elfman-esque vibes of the original score to some extent. It's definitely going for a more orchestral feeling traditional score sound, but it's done entirely with synths. I think the credits even say score written and performed by Michael Lloyd and Reg Powell, so I think that is just the two of them playing all of these synth sounds themselves. This is probably my least favorite of the scores out of the three Ghoulies movies I've seen. There's nothing really stand out about it in any way. It has its fun moments, it punctuates the action where it needs to, and it does have some fun little quirky moments. There's a nod to 2001: A Space Odyssey during a couple scenes where the Ghoulies have found a fridge full of beers, as well as a scene where they happen upon a bunch of girls in the shower. Ugh. It kind of scores those moments as just like these epic 2001: A Space Odyssey moments, which was kind of on the nose and eye-roll worthy, but It was a fun little quirk that stood out. The lore of the Ghoulies in this has been altered so that they are summoned by this comic book. I guess that's not totally an alteration because there's like a reveal later that it's actually an underground comic that was translated from a medieval manuscript. And I guess if you really, really wanted to, you could say, oh, that was one of the books that the Graves family had in the first movie. But I do not think the filmmakers cared about that at all. The Ghoulies are now summoned from, the best way to describe it is a toilet cauldron, because it's this toilet, but it looks like this pastiche of a like old druid cauldron with faces carved on the sides of it, and it's just a fun idea. I love how the toilet thing, which was just a throwaway gag from the first film that got amped up in the trailers, has become more and more a part of what the Ghoulies are as the films progress. But I find it weird that the Ghoulie toilet is just very conveniently in the middle of campus. The biggest change to the Ghoulies in this is that they talk. And you might be thinking, oh, Ghoulies go to college, they get themselves an education, and they learn how to talk. No, they can just talk from the beginning, and there's no explanation given for why they can talk now. They just can. It's not like they actually get themselves an education or anything in this movie. From the get-go, as soon as they get into this college, they are right there with all of these debauched gatherings of the fraternities chugging beers and causing mayhem, and they do not learn a single thing over the course of this movie, and I don't think anyone in the movie or watching the movie did either. If it wasn't very apparent already, this is a way more screwball film than the first two. In a way, you could say this is like the Gremlins 2 of the franchise, as I think Felicia from Girly Gore said, just throwing all of the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. But even with something like Gremlins 2, there's an element of satire and fun self-aware references there. This is way more juvenile than that. There's a lot of toilet humor, no pun intended, and fart jokes, and really slapsticky stuff, and not good slapstick for the most part either. Some of it's fun. Most of the humor in this doesn't land for me, but the overall just spirit of madness that this movie has does make me smile to some extent. And there are a few genuinely funny bits, one of which is surprisingly a sex scene, because I usually hate those. Two of the characters are attempting to have sex on different pieces of workout equipment in this one character's room, and it's just failing spectacularly, and I just thought that was one of the most awkward, unexplainable, and just really ridiculous concepts in the film, and I loved that, because they're like trying to take each other's clothes off while they're on a treadmill or this like workout bicycle, and they're just falling everywhere. It's just so awkward, and I love it. There's really tiny things that just cross some line of stupidity where the joke becomes so dumb that it's now brilliant and hilarious for me. For example, there's just a point where Kevin McCarthy's character is talking to the Ghoulies, and he's like, oh, you've fallen in with all the debauched teens now, and they're just like screaming about partying and beer, and then they move on to another topic of conversation, and then just one of the Ghoulies mid-conversation just goes, beer, and it's just completely out of the blue. It doesn't have anything to do with the conversation, but just the idea that this craving for beer has been implanted in his brain and will just come out of his mouth at random moments is really funny to me for some reason. We don't get a lot of kills. The scare sequences in this, I guess, are all just pranks that the Ghoulies are playing, which are a bit more unhinged than the pranks of the other students, but usually not deadly. Kills in this operate on cartoon logic. In the second film, they were all playful and silly, but there was still something vicious and painful about them, and all of the stakes of everything is gone in this film. Everything is just pure slapstick, and while that's fun to some extent, this movie just did not connect with me as much as the first two Ghoulies films did, but it was fun. I think this movie does very much lack the heart of the first two films. There's obviously a lot of passion put into just the spirit of silly fun that's in this film, but other than that, there's not much. That said, I'm always just looking for some kind of deeper meaning in the stupidest of films, and I managed to find one here. I think there is a theme of uncertainty about the future in this film because these are college kids and they don't know what they're going to be doing going forward, and there's this fear that they might be just throwing their futures away for a tinfoil crown, and this somewhat stuffy, tyrannical teacher that they've got is gonna flush all of their futures down the drain because they're acting wild, but also because he hates his lot in life and is resentful of them and is therefore not going to give them the choice of having a future either. The character stands up at some point and says something to the extent of, "You're blaming everything on me, and unfairly so, and I don't care what you do to me, you can't take my future away from me." And that felt genuinely heartfelt, but it's lost in this total mess of a film. And I don't think there was ever really meant to be a message, but I liked that that was an element. There is a love story as well, which feels very derivative. If I had to compare it to another film, I would say this is very bargain bin love triangle from Night of the Creeps. The characters even look the same. I think the character is Steve, kind of the obnoxious jock character in Night of the Creeps, and the obnoxious jock from the other fraternity in this film look very similar, at least in my head. But it's just a very basic love triangle with two different guys fighting over one girl, and the actors do what they can with it, but it didn't really connect with me. Visually speaking, the production design in this is, like everything else, lower quality all around, but it makes the most of its trashiness. It's totally embracing the stupidity and the trashiness in every aspect, and I kind of like that grainy, gritty, messy look of the film, because it does fit with what they're doing. And there were some little bits that I did really like the design of, notably the cauldron toilet. All of the teen characters in this particularly are really, really cartoonish. Again, like everything else, I'm a broken record at this point. They're all decently acted and decent to watch. The love triangle is kind of engaging, I guess. But I really don't care about any of them. If the Ghoulies won in the end of this film and ended up, blowing up the entire school, I probably wouldn't care. That said, the Ghoulies in this are really annoying too. Seeing Kevin McCarthy, this actor that I predominantly know for the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, playing this stuffy teacher is really fun. I talked about the human villain character in Ghoulies 2 falling into the same prototype as a character like Arthur Savage from Anna and the Apocalypse, which would come years later. I think that Kevin McCarthy's character in this is that even more so. He is very much that stuffy teacher who wants to ruin everyone's fun, but behind everyone's back is just as gleefully, immaturely nasty as any of those teens are, and probably more so. I still prefer Arthur Savage. I probably have an Anna and the Apocalypse bias to some extent, but I love Kevin McCarthy's acting in this, as over the top as it is. And the Ghoulies now have these newfound personalities that come with their newfound ability to speak English. There's only 3 of them this time. The kind of round-headed Ghoulie, the cat Ghoulie, the one that was meowing in 2 that I loved so much, and a rat-looking Ghoulie. They now act like cut-rate versions of the Three Stooges, is probably the best way to put it. They even knock each other's heads together and do little Three Stooges-y bits. I kind of feel like the round-headed one was supposed to be Mo, and the cat one is kind of the curly character, and the rat is Larry. They turn to face someone at some point and they go, "Slowly I turn." Of course, quoting the Niagara Falls Three Stooges bit, and just, again, doing a lot of the slapstick stuff. And they are just one-liner machines at this point. They do not shut up. Just catching some of the weird little things they'll say sometimes is fun, but they kind of get grating at some point. I definitely like them better when they were more animalistic, because I found that funnier personally, because you really didn't know how their brains worked. They were way more unpredictable because they lacked that entirely human element, and it felt like they were just occasionally like doing a parody of human things and then just doing their own weird stuff, like coating someone in goo. And now they just seem like more monstrous versions of the teens. As soon as they end up on the campus, they are ogling all of the teen girls, they're drinking beer, they're dressing in some of the teens' clothes that they've found, they're pulling pranks, and it just feels like everyone's the same character in this movie. There is no straight man. Kevin McCarthy tries to be the straight man and be the stuffy teacher who's trying to be done with all this nonsense, but he's pranking everybody else at the same time. On the one hand, there's kind of some commentary there. There's no truly good self-righteous character in this. Everybody's got a nasty side. But when there's no straight man for any of the characters to play off, when everyone is completely screwball and zany, it kind of gets monotonous and just isn't funny to me anymore. That said, I do like the voice of the cat Ghoulie, because it does sound cat-like when he says things. For example, beer. But I do miss the actual meowing as well. Effects-wise, the Ghoulies in this feel less like this time, again, because they're chatterboxes, and the puppeteers really can't keep up with how much dialogue they've got. It doesn't really sync up when they just have to meow or hiss or growl. It syncs up way better. The first two films knew their limits, and this one doesn't, which I admire to some extent, because it's just going way over the top with it, but it just didn't click with me. And the one little bit of hand-drawn effects that we get in this film is used on the goofiest effect ever. There's this running gag in this movie which is so juvenile, and I kind of love it and kind of hate it, where the Ghoulies just pop up different places, and one will go, prank week, and the next one will go, prank week, and the third Ghoulie, I think the cat Ghoulie, will pop up and go, pancakes? And the other Ghoulie will hit that Ghoulie over the head. And the first time they do that, it never happens another time in the film. These little cartoon stars appear above his head, and it's gone full Looney Tunes at that point. And I don't even know. If this wasn't the most cohesive of my reviews, that's partly me being tired and partly just this film being a mess. But I think my thoughts on this film are kind of clear at this point. I did not like this film as much as the first two. I don't hate it either. I think it's silly fun for what it is. I feel like a lot of people would say this is the Gremlins 2 or the Seed of Chucky of the franchise, but I don't think that's fair to those two films, to be honest. I know some people just despise the hell out of Seed of Chucky, but I think there is well done satire and thought put into that film, and there's a lot of great self-aware humor in Gremlins 2 as well. With this film, it feels like it was written by a 12-year-old boy. If that's your jam, you're gonna have a blast with this film. I feel like I would totally enjoy throwing on this movie with some of my friends and just laughing about it. But in terms of rewatch value, I'm definitely gonna be going back to the first two Ghoulies films a lot more than this one. I don't think this is a must-see, but there is some historical value to it, I guess, with the early bit part from Matthew Lillard and seeing Kevin McCarthy much later in his life and having it directed by John Carl Buechler, who's done so much great effects work. So if you want to see it for those reasons, be my guest. And if you just want a stupid fun time, I would still point you in the direction of other films first. But I would point you in the direction of this film before I would Bud the Chud. I do like this a little bit more than that. I think it's a little bit more than just cute, I guess, the way that film was. With this movie, there are some jokes that I thought were legitimately funny, some design stuff that I legitimately thought was cool, and just moments of stupidity that were so stupid they were actually hilarious. Otherwise, I'm tired. I really don't have that much else to say on this film, so if any of what I describe sounds up your alley, go for it. That is my review of Ghoulies 3, Ghoulies Go to College. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!